Hey, 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 it's AAA Wednesday, which stands for Ask Alyssa Anything. It's my weekly Q&A session where I'm addressing all your questions, concerns, troubles, anxieties about writing, publishing, and everything in between. Just two quick things before we get started today. If you're new to my channel, welcome. In addition to these Q&As, I also do weekly deep dives either into a specific writing tactic or technique or the publishing industry, as that's my professional background. So if any of that interests you, please consider subscribing and joining our amazing community of authors. And before we get started, if you could hit that thumbs up button, it takes about a second, but it really helps out my channel with the YouTube algorithm, and I really appreciate it. Okay, so here's the first question today. I have a question I'd love answered. As an aspiring YA author with social media anxiety, is it possible to find success without being plastered all over socials? We're in this landscape where authors, traditionally published and self-published alike, are feeling as though they are more and more responsible for creating a personal brand and building a platform, building a following so that they can market their books to their audience. So in this environment, if you personally don't feel compelled to post on social media or you don't want to, then are you doomed at having any success with publishing? It can be a really confusing thing to navigate and a overwhelming place to be in. While having a platform of some kind and posting on social media can be a benefit to your publishing and hopefully drive more readers to your books and allow you to engage with your readers more directly, it is not a necessity in order to publish successfully. If you go the traditional publishing route, you will likely have a conversation with your publishing team, including your marketing and publicity teams, about your willingness to post on social media or have an author website and things like that. But I've never heard of a case where it is a complete deal breaker if an author doesn't have social media or doesn't want to post on social media, that the publishing team no longer wants to work with them. First and foremost, your publisher and your literary agent want to work with you because they love your story as much as you do. That's what matters most. Maybe too, there's a way that you and your publishing team can figure out what you are comfortable sharing on social media, or if there are any alternative methods that you can use to successfully market the book. Remember that you all have the same goal, which is to sell as many copies of your book and get it in as many readers' hands as possible. If you are self-publishing though, you will have to think strategically about how readers are going to find you if it is not going to be through social media. It's totally fine if you're not willing to post about your book or have a social media platform at all, but readers have to find you in some way. And many authors who are successful in self-publishing do drive readers directly to their books and engage with their reader communities directly. So you just have to find a way to navigate that. Here's the next question. I don't know how to ask you this without you seeing my manuscript. I'll try. My novel has 4 separate but equal storylines. They all fall together by the end of the book. How should the novel flow without using "meanwhile" in another part of the country, or at the same time a celebrity has been sent the same gift? Is there a way to do it right and compelling? And no, I do not have 4 books that I could do. For instance, a rare bug bite is causing people to go crazy and destroy everything around them. Now, if 4 different cases like this happen in 4 parts of the country, each case with young, old, man, girl, how do I make the story flow is my question. As of now, a scene will stop with a question or something the character has to follow up on, then I go to a different storyline. I hope you can see my question and not confuse you. I do totally see what you're saying here. In the case that you have multiple storylines that don't necessarily connect immediately, but do connect by the end of the story, the key is to make sure the reader is equally invested in all of these storylines, that all of them feel equally weighed in the book, and we're not disproportionately interested in one or another or spending way more page time with one over another. Because when you get that imbalance in the storylines, that's when the structure is going to start to fall apart, because the reader is not going to be engaged in those lesser storylines that aren't given as much attention or development. As long as you are finding ways to signal to the reader how the storylines are interconnected, I do think it's possible for the reader to stay engaged with all 4 storylines even though they're separate. For instance, if it's very clear that all the characters are in the same environment or grappling with the same phenomenon, then that is already going to create a through line for them that makes them interested to keep reading, to see how each individual character deals with that situation. But if the storylines are so disparate that the reader can't draw any thread at all between them, then it might be tricky to keep them engaged all the way to the end when we find out how they connect. So as long as you're able to insert those little moments where the reader sees the connections between storylines, that's going to help a lot. For instance, you could mention the same location, the same place, a restaurant, a street. You could have the same character, even a minor secondary character, appear in multiple storylines. Those little things are going to signal to the reader all these storylines belong as one novel, and they're going to be on board with switching between them and seeing how the story unfolds. If you've been enjoying my YouTube videos, I have great news. I'm putting together so much more content for you on my newsletter website, chapter-break.com. With my newsletter, I'm delivering exclusive publishing insights direct to your inbox, including interviews with literary agents and best-selling authors, and deep dive editorial case studies from my experience as a professional developmental book editor. As a freebie for signing up to my newsletter, you'll get my story self-assessment worksheet, which is a resource I designed to help you get unstuck with your current draft, see what's working well in it, and what you can improve to take it to the next level. The links to download your free story self-assessment and check out the archive of my newsletter are in the description. Here's the next question. Hi, Alyssa. I stumbled upon your video about head hopping, and it was so enlightening, and now I'm deep diving through your vids and have subbed. I'm so happy you found it helpful. One thing I'm really worried about as I'm editing my book is overusing scene breaks in the few instances where I really think multiple POV characters' inner thoughts are necessary to make the point land. Should I err on the side of caution and just make the transitions to a new thinker as clear as possible? Or are the multiple scene breaks worth looking a little jarring? When you're trying to transition a novel from head hopping into rotating close third person, it's critical that you're being extremely thoughtful with where you are placing the scene breaks, and you're not just chopping up the scene as you already had it in the head hopping version, because with head hopping, we're typically jostling around between multiple characters' POVs in very quick succession. That's why it's called head hopping, right? We're going from one to the next, and then hopping back and forth. So if you just insert line breaks every time you switch POVs as you did when you were head hopping, on the page, the reader is going to be still jostling between the characters' heads, right? Which is what we want to avoid. Instead, you need to rethink how you are approaching each individual scene and whose POV we need to be inhabiting for each scene. There are going to be dramatic moments in the story where we're only inhabiting one person's POV. That doesn't mean that we can't get insight into how the other characters reacted to that same event, though. The way that you're going to convey the other characters' thoughts and reactions within this scene is, one, through describing how the POV character registers and notices the other character's response. So, for instance, the POV character could notice the character sighing, right? And that's going to tell us something about how that character is feeling. Another tactic you can use is once we switch to that other POV character that you wanted to convey in this dramatic scene, we're going to basically catch the reader up on how they felt during that previous scene. So you're going to pick up the next scene from this other character's perspective, and the reader's immediately going to be thinking, oh my gosh, well, what did they think about that thing that just happened, a scene ago or 2 scenes ago? You're going to use their narrative reflection here to show the reader how they were thinking and feeling in that moment and fill that gap for us. So even though in the scene itself, we're only inhabiting one character's POV, we are eventually going to fill in the gaps and see how the other characters were reacting as well. That's going to be much cleaner than still trying to keep multiple characters' POVs within that one singular scene, because that's going to end up being essentially just a different version of head hopping. You really want to allow the reader to sit with each POV through the entire duration of scenes and only switch POVs at the true scene breaks. That's all we had time for today. If you have a question you'd like to ask, drop it in the comments here and it will be added to my queue for my next session. Before you head out, don't forget your free story self-assessment worksheet and my newsletter link in the description below. And hit that thumbs up button if you're enjoying these Q&As and want me to keep doing them. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on my next session. Thanks so much for watching and happy writing.